The gates of the town creaked shut behind her with a sound that seemed to echo louder than any sermon bell. Dust lifted with a slow swing of wood and iron, and the woman, barely more than a girl at 22, tightened the thin shawl about her shoulders. Beside her, a child of 5 clutched her hand, small fingers bone-thin and trembling. No one spoke farewell. The townsfolk had gathered not to bless her leaving but to watch it, faces set like stone, eyes sharp as flint. A woman who bore shame was meant to walk quietly, and she did, but the quiet did not stop the whispers that clung to her back like burrs. The child stumbled on the uneven ground, barefoot on gravel, and her mother bent low, lifting her with arms that trembled from hunger more than weight. She had not eaten in 4 days, but the little one had eaten less. They walked until the walls of the town were only a line of wood and smoke in the distance, and still she heard the preacher's voice in memory. Sin leaves no door open, and no roof to rest beneath. He had looked at her as though she were a warning carved into flesh, and the elders had nodded, and the women had turned away, clutching their children as though shame could leap from one to another. The road stretched out, empty and merciless. Weeds clawed at the edges, and the late summer sun pressed hot against their shoulders. The child whimpered once, then fell silent, lips pressed thin with effort. She had learned too young that complaint brings no mercy. Her mother shifted her weight, carrying her for a while, then setting her down when her own knees buckled. They walked in silence, save for the sound of breath and the distant cry of a hawk. By the 4th day, hunger became a fog. The woman saw it in the way her little girl swayed as she walked, in the way her steps dragged and her eyes glazed. She tore the hem of her own dress and wrapped it about the child's blistered feet. That was all she could give, cloth, her body, and the stubborn will not to collapse. When the wind picked up, carrying the scent of horse and dust, she almost thought it was a trick of the mind. But then he appeared, a rider cresting the rise, tall on a chestnut horse, hat brim shadowing his face. He slowed when he saw them. The woman stiffened, fear curling inside her. Men on horseback had brought her little but grief, and she clutched her daughter closer, as though her body might be shield enough. The rider studied them for a long moment before dismounting. His boots struck the earth with a quiet thud. He was young, though older than she, perhaps 26, shoulders broad from work, hands scarred from rope and leather. His eyes, when he lifted them, were steady, not sharp, not pitying. Simply steady. The child looked up at him first. Hunger loosened her tongue where fear silenced her mother's. She stepped forward, her small face pale beneath strands of tangled hair. Her voice cracked, soft as a prayer. Mama was cast out from the city. We been starvin' for 4 days. The words hung in the heat, too large for her small body, too sharp for the air around them. The cowboy's jaw shifted, as though he bit down on silence before letting it go. His gaze moved from the child to the mother. She stood rigid, shoulders drawn tight, ready to meet scorn, to hear judgment again. She braced herself for it the way a body braces for a blow. But he only spoke in a low voice, rough as gravel yet gentler than she had heard in years. You're comin' with me. The mother's lips parted, but no sound came. She did not trust it. She did not trust kindness that came so sudden, like water in a drought. The child swayed on her feet, and the cowboy stepped closer, steadying her with a hand against her shoulder. He looked at the woman again, his gaze unwavering. Ain't no child should carry hunger like that. The sun dipped lower, painting the road in long shadows. The woman felt the weight of choice press against her chest. She could turn away, keep walking into the wilderness with nothing but shame for a companion, or she could step toward the unknown held open by this quiet man. She did not yet believe in grace, but she believed in her daughter's need. Behind them, the town's walls caught the last light, their gates closed, their judgment final. Before them, the cowboy's horse waited, reins loose, a silent invitation. The child tugged at her mother's hand, eyes wide with something like hope. The woman drew a slow breath. And though her heart pounded with mistrust, though her body remembered every door slammed and every harsh word, she stepped forward. The cowboy gave a single nod, almost imperceptible, and lifted the child into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. He turned toward the horizon without another word. The woman followed, each step heavy with the memory of where she had been, and trembling with the question of where she was now going. And in that fading light, With the road stretching out before them, the first fragile thread of belonging took hold. The ride to his homestead was not long, but to her it stretched like a trial. Each hoofbeat sounded like a question she could not answer. She walked beside the horse, declining his offer to ride. Pride held her upright when her body longed to collapse. The child dozed against his chest, small head nestled beneath his chin. The woman's eyes kept darting between them, torn between gratitude and suspicion. She had seen kindness before, always followed by a price. When the cabin came into view, its roofline stark against the evening sky, she felt both relief and dread. Relief that it was real, dread that she might discover it was only another place to be turned away. The cabin was modest, built of rough logs, its windows small, a curl of smoke rising from the chimney. Chickens scratched near the steps, and a dog raised its head but did not bark. It was not wealth, not grandeur, but it was shelter. He dismounted, setting the child gently on her feet. The girl blinked herself awake, and when she saw the chickens, she let out a small gasp of wonder. "Mama, they got feathers all gold." The sound of her delight made the mother's throat tighten. She had forgotten the sound of her daughter's joy. He pushed the door open, standing aside as though it were her right to enter first. She hesitated, hand hovering at the threshold. Inside was warmth, the air scented faintly of wood smoke and beans simmering in an iron pot. She stepped in cautiously, her daughter tugging eagerly at her hand. The room was simple, a table scarred with years of use, a bed pushed against the wall, a shelf lined with jars. Not much, but more than they had. He set about quietly, ladling food into bowls without comment, sliding one across the table toward her, another toward the child. She stared at it, the steam curling upward like a promise she didn't trust. Her hands shook as she pulled the bowl closer. Her daughter needed no convincing, spoon clattering as she devoured the beans. The sound was both a balm and a knife, the proof of how far hunger had carried them. The woman ate slowly, though her body cried out for more. She feared if she yielded too quickly, it might vanish, and she would wake to find it only a dream. Across the table, he ate in silence, eyes lowered, giving her space. He did not ask her story. He did not offer pity. He only passed her a slice of cornbread and said, "Eat slow now. Food's meant to last, not vanish." The girl giggled, cheeks full, and the sound startled them all, breaking the quiet like sunlight through a shutter. For a moment the mother allowed herself to breathe, to taste not only beans but the possibility of safety. When the bowls were empty, he rose to place more wood on the fire. Sparks leapt, painting the room in shifting light. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, uncertain what she owed him, uncertain how long they might stay before he asked for payment she could not give. Shame coiled tight within her, the memory of doors slammed and voices condemning her. She had been told so often she was unfit, unworthy, that she began to believe it herself. Her daughter climbed into her lap, eyelids heavy, head resting against her chest. The weight of the child grounded her, and for the first time in days, she felt the faint stir of calm. The cowboy watched from his chair by the fire, expression unreadable. His silence was not coldness but restraint, as though he knew words could wound as easily as they could heal. The mother traced the child's hair, whispering a lullaby so soft it barely stirred the air. The flames crackled, the wind shifted against the walls, and still he said nothing. It was the quiet that unnerved her most, because in quiet there was room for memory. She remembered the preacher's voice, sharp and certain. "The Lord lifts the lowly, and he fills the hungry with good things, but only if they walk righteous." His eyes had cut through her, declaring she was not righteous, that hunger would be her just reward. She had believed him then. But now here, her child was fed, her body warmed, and the words felt less like prophecy and more like cruelty. When the girl finally slept, the woman looked across the fire. "Why?" Her voice was raw, carrying the ache of every exile, every suspicion. "Why would you take us in?" He did not answer at once. His gaze rested on the flames as though he sought the truth in their restless dance. When he did speak, his voice was low, almost reverent. "Because I seen too many left to the cold. Ain't right for a child to starve when I got bread to share." She swallowed hard, unsure whether to trust it, unsure whether kindness could be so simple. But her daughter's even breathing against her chest was proof enough that for tonight, at least, the words were true. The fire burned low. Shadows thickened along the cabin walls, reaching across the floor like hands. She felt the weight of them, the weight of her own doubts, and wondered if this place would hold them tomorrow, or if it too would cast them out when the town's whispers reached its door. The cowboy leaned back, hat tipped low, but his eyes flicked toward her once, steady, unyielding. In that look was no demand, no bargain. Only a quiet question that tomorrow would have to answer. And with that silence, she realized the night was not yet theirs to keep. Morning came with the smell of coffee and damp earth. The child woke first, padding barefoot across the wooden floor, eyes bright with the discovery of safety. She pressed her nose to the window, watching the chickens peck at the yard, then turned back to her mother with a grin. The mother smiled faintly, though her stomach knotted with unease. Rest had softened her body, but worry had not released its hold. Safety was never more than alone, something taken back once gossip caught the wind. The cowboy saddled his horse while the sun rose pale over the plains. He handed the mother a small pouch of coins. "Take this. Buy what you need in town." His words were simple, without ceremony, yet they pressed against her chest like a weight she was not sure she could carry. She tried to refuse, but he shook his head. "Ain't charity. A house needs flour same as a fire needs wood." So she went, her daughter skipping at her side, clutching her hand tight as if to anchor her. The dirt street of the town stretched long and suspicious, doors half open, eyes peering from behind curtains. She felt them watching, felt their whispers stir like dry leaves. She kept her chin low, voice quiet as she asked the shopkeeper for flour, salt, and soap. The shopkeeper's eyes narrowed. He measured her not by her words but by her past. He glanced at the coins, then at the child. "So he took you in, did he? Reckon pity makes a fool out of men." His voice was not loud, but it carried. A woman by the door sniffed in disapproval, and a man stacking barrels outside let out a low laugh. The mother's cheeks burned. She gathered the small bundle quickly, willing herself to silence. But the child, her daughter with her unbroken spirit, stood square before the shopkeeper, fists balled. "She's good," the girl blurted, voice trembling yet fierce. "You don't know her." The shopkeeper blinked, surprised at the small voice's boldness. Then he sneered, shaking his head. "Children learn lies quick when taught." The mother pulled her daughter close, hurrying from the store before tears betrayed her. The child's small defiance echoed in her ears, both a balm and a wound. She wished the world were gentle enough that a child didn't need to defend her own mother. When they returned, the cowboy was chopping wood by the shed. He looked at her, at the strain in her eyes, and knew without asking. He said nothing, only took the bundle from her arms and set it on the table. His silence was not indifference but a shield, as though he bore the weight of the town's scorn in her stead. Later, when he rode into town for supplies of his own, the whispers reached him. An old ranch hand leaned against the post, spitting dust, shaking his head. "You'll ruin yourself, son, keepin' strays like that woman. Folks don't forget. Best let her go, for she drags you down with her." The cowboy fixed him with a calm gaze, voice low and unshaken. "Ain't a stray. She's a soul." He tipped his hat and walked on, leaving the ranch hand muttering in his shadow. That night, as the fire burned low, the mother spoke in halting tones. "They'll never let me stay. Not truly. You'll pay the price for shelterin' me." Her eyes shimmered with tears unshed, her voice heavy with resignation. She had lived too long beneath judgment to believe in reprieve. He stirred the embers with the iron poker, sparks rising like scattered stars. "I ain't beholden to their reckonin'," he said simply. "I seen what I seen. That's enough." She wanted to believe him, wanted to rest in the firmness of his voice. But doubt gnawed at her. She lay awake long after the child slept, listening to the wind rattle against the cabin walls, wondering when the storm of whispers would break through the door. In the days that followed, their rhythm began to take shape. She baked bread from the flour, hands remembering what they had been denied the chance to do. He fixed a broken hinge, his quiet movements filling the silence like unspoken promises. The child played in the yard, laughter ringing against the hills. Yet beneath it all, the hum of judgment lingered, never far, like a wolf circling in the dark. One afternoon, as the girl gathered eggs in her apron, a figure appeared at the fence line, the town's preacher, his black coat stark against the sunlit grass. He rested a hand on the rail, gaze heavy with meaning. "The wages of sin is death," he said softly, almost like a benediction. His eyes moved to the child. "And the little ones often bear it hardest." The mother froze, apron slipping from her hands. The cowboy stepped out from the shed, shoulders squared, voice steady. "This here's my land. My say's the only one that matters on it." The preacher held his gaze for a long, silent beat, then turned back toward the town, dust swirling at his heels. The mother's knees weakened, and she caught herself against the porch rail. The child clung to her leg, wide-eyed, whispering, "Mama." The cowboy stood still, jaw set, watching the preacher vanish. And in the hush that followed, the mother knew the quiet peace they had found was already shadowed by the storm of judgment pressing ever closer. The days lengthened into a kind of rhythm, fragile but real. Dawn brought the sound of roosters and the smell of wood smoke curling into the morning air. The child would tumble from her blanket to chase the dog in the yard, her laughter carrying through the open door. The mother found herself tending to small tasks she had thought forever lost to her. Mending shirts, sweeping dust from corners, kneading dough with hands that once only trembled. Each act was small, yet together they began to shape the outline of something she dared not call home. The cowboy remained steady, moving through the days with quiet labor. He fixed fences, split wood, and led the horse to pasture. He was not a man of words, but of presence, and in that presence the woman felt an odd kind of shelter. He asked for nothing, offered more than she expected, and filled silences with the scrape of a chair or the low hum of a tune she did not know. One afternoon, the child watched him saddle the pony, eyes wide with longing. "Could I?" she whispered. He glanced at her mother, who hesitated before nodding. With care, he lifted the little girl onto the pony's back, steadying her with large hands. "Hold tight now," he said. The girl squealed in delight as the animal stepped forward, her laughter tumbling like water over stones. The mother stood on the porch, arms folded, torn between fear and gratitude. When the ride ended, the girl leapt down and ran to her, cheeks flushed, voice breathless. "Mama, I rode. I really rode." For the first time in weeks, the mother laughed, a sound that startled even herself. The evenings brought a softer kind of work. Together, they tended a small patch of earth by the porch, planting seeds he had stored away. The mother pressed them into the soil, her daughter's small hands patting the earth flat. "Will they grow?" the girl asked. The cowboy leaned on his shovel, answering simply, "If we give him time." The words sank into the mother like more than farming advice. She felt the weight of them, the truth that patience and tending might yield more than hunger and loss. Yet shadows clung still. One evening, while mending by the fire, she spoke in halting fragments of the life that had been taken from her. "I wasn't wicked," she whispered, needle trembling between her fingers. "But they said I was. Said I didn't deserve a place among them." She stared at the cloth in her lap, unable to lift her gaze. The cowboy sat across from her, polishing his spurs. He let the silence hold for a long time before answering. His voice was steady, not loud, but it carried weight. "Home don't ask if you're fit. It just waits to be made." The words settled over her like a blanket. She did not answer, but her hands grew steadier on the fabric. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine that perhaps she was not unworthy of belonging. The child, sensing shifts adults tried to hide, became the bridge between them. She left wildflowers on the cowboy's chair, brought him water when he worked the fields, asked him to tell stories of the cattle drives and storms he had seen. His replies were short, yet his eyes softened each time she tugged at his sleeve. The mother watched these exchanges with a quiet ache. She had been certain her daughter's future would be nothing but hunger and scorn. Now she saw how easily laughter bloomed when met with gentleness. Still, the outside world pressed close. When she walked into town with him for supplies, whispers curled like smoke in their wake. Mothers drew their children nearer, men smirked with knowing looks. The child reached for the cowboy's hand, and without hesitation, he gave it. The mother saw it and felt something shift inside her, a fragile thread tightening. It was not romance, not yet, but it was the beginning of trust. One evening, clouds rolled heavy across the sky, thunder grumbling in the distance. The family, though she did not yet dare call it that, hurried to gather laundry from the line. The child squealed at the cold drops spattering her cheeks, and the cowboy swept her up, running for the porch as rain broke open. They burst inside laughing, dripping water across the floor. The mother, hair clinging damp to her face, met his eyes for a breathless instant. Something unspoken lingered there, something that frightened her as much as it steadied her. The storm raged through the night, rattling shutters, pouring against the roof. The child slept through it, curled in quilts. But the mother lay awake, listening not only to thunder but to the words the town's preacher had left at her door. The little ones often bear it hardest. His warning haunted her. She could not shake the fear that the world would find a way to rip even this small fragile belonging from her grasp. Toward dawn, when the storm eased, she slipped to the porch. The cowboy was already there, sitting in the gray light, hat tipped back, eyes on the horizon. He did not turn when she joined him. The silence stretched, broken only by the dripping of rain from the eaves. At last he spoke, voice rough from disuse. "They'll come knockin'. Mark my words. Folks don't abide what they don't understand." He turned then, eyes steady on hers. "Question is, what'll you do when they do?" The words cut sharper than any storm, because she knew he was right. And she had no answer yet. The day of reckoning came quiet as dusk itself, with the sun sagging low and shadows stretching long across the prairie. The mother had just drawn water from the well, her daughter humming beside her, when the sound of horses drifted on the evening wind. It was not one rider, but many, hoofs thudding in unison, dust rising like smoke from a fire yet to be named. She froze, the bucket sloshing against her skirt, and the child's song faltered. The cowboy stepped from the barn, rag in hand, eyes narrowing as he caught sight of the dark line approaching. He dropped the rag and reached for the child, steadying her with a hand on her small shoulder. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of knowing. "Stay close, both of you." The riders came into view, townsfolk, led by the preacher in his black coat. Behind him rode men with hard eyes and women whose lips pressed thin with judgment. They reined up before the fence, horses snorting, dust swirling around them like a shroud. The preacher lifted a hand, and silence fell heavy. "You shelter shame under your roof," the preacher said, his voice smooth as oil yet sharp as glass. "This woman has been judged unfit, cast out for her sins. And now you would let her child grow under that same stain." His gaze swept over the mother, lingering on her lowered head, then shifted to the cowboy. "You bring ruin upon yourself, and worse, you mock the laws of God." The child clung tighter to her mother's skirt, whispering, "Mama." The woman's heart beat wild, her breath shallow. She had known this moment would come. She had prepared herself to surrender if it meant sparing her daughter, to accept exile again if only the girl might be spared the weight of judgment. But the cowboy stepped forward, placing himself between them and the crowd. His shoulders squared, his voice low but steady. "This here's my land, my roof, my say. She ain't yours to cast out any more." Murmurs rippled through the riders, sharp as rustling leaves. The preacher raised his chin, quoting scripture as though it were a hammer. "The wages of sin is death. The book warns us plain. Better the child be taken in by righteous hands than left to perish under her mother's folly." The mother's knees buckled, tears burning her eyes. She reached for her daughter, ready to yield, but the girl broke free and ran to the cowboy, clutching his leg with both arms. Her small voice cracked but carried clear. "Don't let him take us, please." The cowboy's jaw tightened. He looked not at the preacher but at the girl holding him, then back to the townsfolk. Scripture says, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of God." His voice rose, calm yet unshakable. "You call it shame. I call it family." A hush fell, heavier than the dust. The preacher's lips parted, but no words came. Some of the riders shifted uneasily, eyes darting between one another. One woman, once loud in judgment, lowered her gaze to the reins in her hands. The strength of condemnation faltered when met with such steady defiance. The mother, still trembling, lifted her eyes at last. She saw him not as a rescuer but as a man choosing, deliberately, to stand in the storm with her. The realization cut through her shame like light through cloud. She stepped closer, hand finding her daughter's hair, grounding them all together. The preacher's voice returned, but weaker now. "You'll bear the weight of this choice." The cowboy gave a single nod. "Then I'll bear it." Silence stretched again, broken only by the restless shuffle of horses. One by one, without another word, the riders turned their mounts. Dust rose in their wake as they retreated, the preacher last to go, his black coat trailing like a shadow swallowed by dusk. The yard fell still. Only the cry of a far-off crow broke the quiet. The mother exhaled shakily, tears streaking her cheeks, clutching her daughter close. The cowboy stood motionless, watching until the last rider vanished into the horizon. Then he turned, eyes softening as they met hers. Inside, the cabin glowed with firelight. Supper was simple, beans in a tin bowl, cornbread broken by hand, but it felt like a feast. The child laughed at some small jest, crumbs scattering across the table. The mother's hand shook as she reached for her bowl, but when she glanced up, she caught the cowboy watching her, not with judgment, not with pity, but with quiet regard. She looked away quickly, though warmth lingered in her chest. The night deepened. The wind outside was sharp, but within the cabin the fire held steady, its light wrapping around them like a fragile promise. The mother smoothed her daughter's hair as she drifted to sleep, then sat in silence, listening to the crackle of wood and the faint scrape of his chair. It was not salvation carved in stone, nor a vow spoken loud beneath the heavens. It was bread passed at a wooden table, the way her child's laughter mingled with the fire's song, and the quiet strength of a man who had chosen them. And maybe that was how homes were built on the frontier, not in grand gestures, not in the shouts of crowds, but in the hushed defiance of a single kindness that refused to let go. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.